Well, thank you very much first for this nice word, and also Yehuda for being so nice to me, because you remember years ago when I got an Armine Prize in Wiesbaden, I missed the flight from Frankfurt. Why? Because the cab driver got lost because of construction of the highway. So here I am on time and ready to speak about IL-17. So I'm coming from Lyon. Lyon is famous for a number of things, one which is the good food. So I would like you to remember that Lyon now should be famous for one thing, which is the discovery of IL-17. So, well, I could say I have nothing to disclose, but I've reversed conflicts of interest, and you will see that, in fact, what's going on in industry targeting IL-17 is a story I will just discuss. So the point I would like to discuss will start by the discovery of IL-17, and then I will move to the discovery of the cells producing IL-17, because it took 10 years to identify a cell, knowing the protein. Because of the link between IL-17 and arthritis, I will then focus on bone effects of IL-17 in a context of clinical application. Of course, the end will be this research was done at the end to sort of improve the care of complex diseases. So, the story started with rheumatoid arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis, as you know, could be simplified by saying there is a link between chronic inflammation, production of cytokines, and the key one, the first one, was TNF, and at the end, what clinical picture, which is bone and cartilage destruction. In the 80s, 90s, there was in fact a political debate, which was, when we look at the synovium here, what could be the contribution of T cells? And there were people like my good friend in the US, Gary Fahrenstein, saying, well, they are there sleeping, but doing nothing. So the IL-17 story is also trying to build a bridge, saying that if we can identify a factor produced by T cells, or at least by some of the T cells, and that factor doing something, well, at the end, this would mean that at least some T cells are contributing to rheumatoid arthritis. As you know, today, this is a discussion from the past. So when you take this picture, you see the accumulation of an immune system inside the synovium, cell-cell interaction, and in fact the discovery of the function of IL-17 use this assay, which is very simple, which is to take a piece of synovium from surgery in culture, and you see here, you see a well from above, and in the well you have two things. First, you have this lymphoid nodule, and this lymphoid nodule leads to cell proliferation. You see the sunny picture here. These are the proliferation of mesenchymal cells. Mesenchymal cells from the synovium, these are the synoviocytes. And the synoviocyte proliferation is this tumor-like situation you have in rheumatoid arthritis. And of course, in these cultures, you will get the production of soluble factors. So IL-17 to be the protein arrived in Lyon with the name CTLA-8, a factor characterized from T cells, and everything is IL-17 today, so looking like life was easy. In fact, IL-17 has a very difficult start. IL-17 was first found to have no effect on B cells, no effect on T cells. So difficult to be an important immunological protein having no effect on T and B cell. And it's François Faussier here who said, let's use Pierre synoviocytes, so synoviocytes from my patient. And this was the first description that IL-17 could induce IL-6 production by synoviocytes, that's inflammation. At the same time, it could induce IL-8 production by synoviocyte, and IL-8, you will see, that was the first indication that IL-17 will drive neutrophil activation and biology. 1999, François produced the first blocking anti-IL-17 antibody. So we use the supernatants of these cultures and look at what was produced. So that was the time of the production of the characterization of TNF, of IL-1, so no surprise, massive IL-6 production by synoviocyte by these supernatants. And the good result, 1999, remember, was that blocking IL-17 was able to reduce by 2/3 its activity. So something of interest, but something strange from the first day, because if you are honest, you will agree that the effect of IL-17 alone is rather modest when compared to other cytokines such as IL-1. But when IL-17 is in real life, which is interacting with TNF, with IL-1, IL-6, and long list of factors, then the blocking has an effect. So this is absolutely critical, and you will see at the end the clinical application of this concept. Another example from the early days, so using here MIP3 alpha, funny name that became later even a more complex name, which is CCL20. CCL20 is in fact critical for two things. One, to attract the immature dendritic cells, and even more today, it is a key chemotactic factor for the Th17 cells, so leading to the cell-cell interaction inside the tissue. So if you take small amounts of IL-1, TNF and IL-17, but when you combine those together, this is what you get. And this is what you get in real life, where you have small amounts, you don't need kilos of cytokine at the site of disease, at the site of inflammation. So these are the so-called synergistic interaction between cytokines. So this is a summary of the biology of IL-17. So IL-17 can act on mesenchymal cells, epithelial cells, fibroblasts, exactly what I described, inducing IL-6, this is inflammation, inducing IL-8, G and GM-CSF, this is migration, activation of neutrophils. And the CCL20, this is a chemokine able to attract the Th17 cells. At the same time, IL-17 will make inflammation more inflammatory by increasing the production of IL-1, TNF, and IL-6, the classical non-monocyte-derived cytokines. I will later describe this interaction in detail, the crosstalk between osteoblast and osteoclast, leading at the end to bone activation and degradation. And something I will discuss on Saturday and not discuss today is probably even more important. We know now that chronic inflammation has an effect on functional joints, functional organs, but we have recognized, in fact, very recently, that chronic inflammation leads to reduction of life duration. So I will try on Saturday to explain how factors like IL-17 and others act on endothelial cells, leading to cardiovascular events. And this has obviously major clinical, societal applications. In the early days, life was easy, as always, in a sense that there was one IL-17 receptor. So, as a joke, with life, the family has been growing. So today, the IL-17 family is composed of 6 members from A to F, and these members are dimers, homodimers or heterodimers. You will see at the end again, that's critical for clinical application, as is critical the understanding of the structure of the IL-17 receptor. This is the first receptor, 1995, now renamed IL-17RA, because the full receptor is made of 2 chains, the RA and RC, which are needed for the full function. So a few words on IL-17F. Why? Because of clinical applications. So just as before, looking at inflammation, looking at IL-6 production by synoviocytes. This is the effect of TNF, the effect of IL-17A. You combine the two, you get a synergistic interaction. You get more inflammation. Even worse or better for F, because F alone has no effect. So a protein with no effect, but you put that stupid protein with inflammation, this is what you get for protein as well as for a message. So maybe this could be of interest for targeting. This is just looking at colors. These are genes activated or not in synoviocytes. So we look at the green. The green are the genes which are not expressed, and they become red when they are activated. So it's green there, becomes red. This is the TNF activated signatures in synoviocyte. This is the IL-17A here and there. This is the IL-17F. So this one different from this one, and more red for A than for F. As predicted, A is more active than F. But of importance is when you combine the two. This is what you get. This is the size of the red with IL-17A and TNF, and the size of the red combining TNF and IL-17F. So to give you figures, 100 genes, 1,000 genes, 10,000 genes. So the synergistic interaction between the two factors. So now let's switch to what took 10 years to appear, that in 1995, now you remember, the discovery of IL-17 in the human context, and 2005, the identification of the TH17 in the mouse. Back to business, just one point, just to say that you can't patent the TH17 pathway, because 1999, so that was last century already, we got clones from Jacob Natvig from Norway. Some of you remember Jacob. And those clones arrived in Lyon, and here it's me. This is Wim Vandenberg, discuss his results later. So we found that clones from the synovium will induce the production of IL-17 alone, or combined with gamma interferon, confirmed later, but not so much with IL-4. So now a few words on the Th1, Th2 pathway. So years ago, life was either 1 or 2. So remember, back to infections, because that's critical. These factors are critical first. One thing first, which is survival. Th1, this is macrophages and the control of intracellular bacterial infections. This is TB. You need to have a Th1 pathway, meaning gamma interferon, IL-12 and IL-18, to survive against intracellular bacterial infections and TB. The other side, the type 2, eosinophils and basophils, to fight against parasitic infection with the contribution of IL-4. So for many years there was a gap how to explain the most common extracellular bacterial infections, staph and others, and also how to explain fungi. So then arrived the Th17 pathways. You got the point regarding neutrophils, and you know extracellular bacterial infections are associated with neutrophils, contribution of IL-17 here, and a rather more complex pattern of activation. But you see here the non-specific pro-inflammatory cytokine, IL-6 and IL-1, so inflammation will induce the Th17 pathway through the activation of ROR gamma T, a transcription factor, again critical at the end for targeting, and the cytokine IL-23. Because of this is to survive against infection, there is in fact a cross-regulatory inhibition of one pathway against the other, meaning that you need to select the right pathway in front. Let's say an extracellular bacterial infection, you will select the Th17 and not at all the Th2 pathway, which will do just the opposite. This is how the Th17 cells look in real life in tissue. They look like plasma cells, big cells producing kilos, large amounts of cytokine, and in fact producing one cytokine at a time. And if you want to play in test tube, this is what you get. You start with a small T cell becoming bigger and at the end becoming darker. A key factor is that you have the migration of the Th17 to B cells. These cells are defined by intracellular staining of IL-17. And as you know, you are now inside. Obviously, you are not outside. And the outside function for the cytokine is really the biology and the clinical related. So to get the IL-17 outside or the cytokine outside, you need cell-cell interaction, local cell-cell interaction. For instance, with mesenchymal cells, this is skin from psoriatic patients just to expand the concept. You put cells in contact, you get IL-6, but you need to activate the T cells to get this massive IL-17 production. No contact with contact. You see the difference, and this is the local contribution to local disease. So now, because of clinical applications today and registration of IL-17 targeting, a few points of bone. So to simplify, I guess it's sort of obvious, but we can define on one side so-called destructive arthritis. One example, as you have seen the picture, is rheumatoid arthritis. Another one is psoriatic arthritis. You have bone destruction leading at the end to loss of function. In ankylosing spondylitis, it's funny to some extent because it's the opposite. You get inflammation, but there, at some level, you get new bone formation in ligament, in tendons, leading to the syndesmophyte. So, to summarize, we have bone destruction in RA, in psoriatic arthritis, and the worse than destruction is the lack of bone formation and repair. In ankylosing spondylitis, we get massive systemic bone destruction, but the syndesmophyte represents something abnormal, which is ectopic bone formation. So how two cytokines, TNF, we are using TNF inhibitors in one disease which is destroying, in one disease which is making bone. How can we justify that? And you will see that copy and paste with IL-17. And that was indeed for us a big discovery. So, to simplify, I mentioned the osteoblast on top, speaking to the osteoclast, to now the famous bridge, rank ligand on one side, rank on the other side. In a context of non-specific inflammation, was shown years ago the contribution of monocyte-derived cytokine, IL-1, TNF, IL-6, acting either through osteoblasts, this pathway, or directly through osteoclast. Then came the contribution of T cells, some of them through the rank ligand interaction here, and IL-17, that's what I will show, acting on the bridge between the two. So Wim Vandenberg, I showed this picture just before, taking mice with normal knees and in expressing the gene for IL-17 into those knees, you see the induction of inflammation, the induction of destruction, and the pink color, this is cartilage damage. I would say as expected. Also, as expected, when we took pieces of bone instead of synovium in culture, and looking at IL-6 production, remember IL-6 activating osteoclast and destruction, IL-1 will increase, IL-17 will increase, combining the two, you get more increase. vice versa. Treating bone, at least in a test tube, if you take CTX, the classical TTX used in the clinic to look at bone destruction, in the test tube you get bone destruction, you block IL-17, you block TNF, block the two together, it's better. So that was simple explanation. Then we switched to the tendon ligament situation in ankylosing spondylitis. You will agree, from there you will remove this part of the picture. You are left with mesenchymal cells becoming osteoblasts because you see bone formation on X-rays at the site of inflammation. And the big surprise was that we were expecting a killing of osteoblasts. We got just the opposite. And here we have mesenchymal cells from the bone marrow, and looking at calcium deposit. You see TNF will induce calcium deposits, IL-17 new effect, you combine the two, you get more calcium. So big surprise, whereby inflammation was now leading to bone construction. And we played with markers. This is alkaline phosphatase activity, so the clinical marker for bone formation. Really copy and paste, you get really bone cells being activated. So we try to sort of explain the abnormal or complex situation first, and we focus on a gene with a funny name, SNURI3. It's written there, difficult to pronounce, but SNURI3 was described in the mouse as a gene which is able to make the bridge between the osteoblast and the osteoclast on the other side. And you see that TNF will induce SNURI3, not IL-17, and again the synergistic interaction between the two. So now we have something which is pushing the two cells to interact together. And you see the net effect. You have been on a bridge before. To go through the bridge, you need the two sides, and you need the gate to be open. So this is what you get, to summarize. In the destructive form of arthritis, in real bone, you have the bridge, you have osteoclast in close contact with osteoblast. Then this cytokine will induce bone destruction. Now, if the bridge is just one side or close in the middle, you can't go through, so you have no connection between the osteoblast and the osteoclast. And then it's just the opposite. The two cytokines will lead to bone formation. So the local contribution has major effect on the net effect. So this research was for trying to improve care. So this is a summary of what's going on today. So you can have a brand new review from us if you want to know more. So you have seen how this research has been moving over the years. So starting 1996, targeting the IL-17, which is IL-17A, two drugs, secukinumab, pushed by Novartis, secukinumab by Lilly, targeting specifically IL-17A. 1995, brodalumab, first pushed by Amgen to target the IL-17 array chain, and that specifically. Targeting IL-17A and F, so at least two compounds. I've just listed the most obvious, the most well-known, many more are in development. So targeting A and F, based on the 1998 synergistic interaction with TNF, either using on one side a TNF inhibitor and an IL-17 inhibitor, or using what's described as a bispecific antibody, one side blocking TNF, the other side blocking IL-17A. So at least two companies, Johnson and AbbVie, focusing on this pathway. Just to give a full picture, this is not our contribution. The targeting of ROR gamma T, ROC in the human system with small molecules, the use of antibodies against IL-23, so this is acting above on the Th17 differentiation, and the other way in the bottom is acting on the signaling of IL-17. So where are we in terms of clinical results today? Results can be described as not seen before, exceptional in skin inflammation, meaning you have skin inflammation, you can take pictures before, the disease is gone after treatment. This led for secukinumab to get the FDA EMA registration slightly more than 1 year ago. Secukinumab got FDA registration, in fact, a few weeks ago. Results can be described as interesting in psoriatic arthritis and ankylosing spondylitis. Why saying interesting? Because if you have arthritis, you don't get with treatment the correction of the destroyed joints. Results heterogeneous in rheumatoid arthritis with very good responders, no responders, and no response looks like blocking the IL-17 array, so the need of markers to select patients with IL-17 disease. Multiple sclerosis, a disease very difficult to control because of the context of blocking TNF, inducing more disease possibly in those patients, and something of interest showing that clinical trials have to be done because no effect, or worse than no effect, increased disease in Crohn's inflammation. So key points to remember. First, IL-17 amplified because IL-17 alone has a modest effect. Will amplify the innate inflammatory reaction at the local level. This is what I described today, and Saturday I will do the systemic level. Remember the importance of cytokine acting as a team, and the most famous team, business-driven possibly, is between TNF and IL-17. The key contribution of cell-cell interaction, that the local production has to do with cell-cell interaction, and something that I have not discussed, which is the contribution of IL-17 on chronicity. Common sense is to say it's better to treat patients before you get destruction. We know exactly why, because IL-17, specifically again in combination with inflammation, will induce on this mesenchymal cell one thing, which is they will forget something which is critical and explain chronicity. They will forget to die, and this has a long-term effect which explain lack of control after years of chronic inflammation. Thank you very much.